Hello, good morning, and welcome to all of you to the latest MEED webinar this month. We're looking at the MENA water sector projects market, a very exciting, dynamic, and innovative market that is growing very rapidly. It's good to see already 300 attendees, and that highlights, I think, the interest in this fast accelerating market. Now, my name is Edward James. I'm the head of content and research at MEED Global Data, and I'll be presenting today some key data, facts, and opportunities and challenges facing the water projects market in the MENA region. Now, as ever, this presentation is being recorded and will be made available to all of you when it gets uploaded to YouTube in a couple of days' time, and then you'll be able to watch it again, share it with your friends and colleagues, and be able to absorb all of the data that we get, you'll see today. Also, as ever, if you have registered with your email address for this webinar, then you will also, over the course of the next hour or so, receive the actual PDF version of this presentation again, so you can pore over it in your own time, or indeed share it with others in your company. At the end of this 30-minute or so presentation, I will, as ever, take some questions from you. If you do have any questions at any point, please put them into the Q&A box in the Zoom menu, and I will attempt to answer them at the end. So without further ado, let's move on. Very quickly, just for those of you who don't know what MEED is a business intelligence solutions provider. We have a number of different solutions available for our users. We have up on the top left MEED.com, which is our features, news and analysis service, updated daily. We have MEED Projects, which is our real-time live projects tracking platform covering all major projects in the Middle East, Africa, and Central Asia. And then we also have our premium intelligence reports, such as the water report, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. We have our events and marketing solutions businesses. One example of our events is our Saudi Giga Project Summit, which we do every year in Riyadh, and marketing solutions in solutions such as roundtables, thought leadership, bespoke features and articles for companies as well. So if you don't already know about me, please check us out. And then finally, before I start the presentation, I just wanted to highlight to you our latest premium intelligence report, which is looking at the MENA water and wastewater projects market 2025, covering all countries in the MENA region and the water sector. It's very similar to this presentation, except that it's 20 times as long and has a complete rundown, comprehensive outlook and details of the projects in each of the countries in the region with regards to water. And you can benefit from a special discount. You can see here in the top left-hand corner, if you apply the code webinar600, you will get a $600 discount off the report price. To know more, you've got a QR code in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can scan that, take a photo of that, and it will take you to the page where you can see some sample pages and the table of contents if you're interested. Please, again, check that out. Okay, onto the presentation proper. Let's start by looking at the MENA water sector, some key facts and figures. So I want to start by looking at the key drivers driving the projects market for water in the MENA region. So like other sectors and industries, high demographic and economic growth is increasing demand. As the population grows, so too does demand for potable water. And as the economy grows, so too does the need for water for industrial purposes, irrigation, and treated sewage, effluent, and so on. So that's clearly over the last decades, 2 decades or so, been a major driver for investment in water projects. As I mentioned, we've got increased demand for beautification, industrial, agricultural purposes, and now a lot of that is coming from increasing amounts of treated water, water reuse, distribution pipelines, revision pipelines for treated sewage effluent, and of course the sewage treatment plant, wastewater treatment plants required for that. So that's another a key reason for the increasing numbers of investment in the water market in the region. At the same time, we've seen over the last 2 decades the emergence of reverse osmosis, RO technology, which is far less power intensive for desalination purposes. And as some of the more aging thermal facilities, desalination facilities using MSF or MEED technologies, that's multi-stage flash, multi-effect distillation technologies, and in keeping with the desire for net zero, a lot of the existing infrastructure, particularly in places like Saudi Arabia, is being replaced. Instead of using thermal technologies, they are now replacing those with RO technologies instead. Now, also, most countries now have the ambition to extend sewage collection treatment to the majority, if not all of the population in each country. And that has clearly required a lot of investments, particularly in large markets like Algeria, or large countries like Algeria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, geographically large ones where there has to be a large investment in collection pipelines, distribution networks, and treatment plants. So that's clearly also another big investment driver. Now, 20 years ago, unaccounted for water rates and water losses in the networks were very high as 40% in some cases. And the governments have been making big strides in reducing those through improved water networks, better metering of systems and billing of customers. But generally, in terms of the infrastructure, just modernizing the systems and ensuring there's lower leakage levels from desalination plant to end user. Now, another big driver for water investment has been the increasing use of the PPP, public-private partnership mechanism, for the delivery of projects. This has enabled investment in water to be done off balance sheet. The government doesn't have to finance the capex up front. Instead, it pays, it gets the private sector to finance, build and operate the plants over a number of years, and therefore spreads over what would have been its capex over the period of the concessions, which are often 20 to 30 years long. So that's allowed water sector to keep growing regardless of government budgets, and therefore not dependent necessarily on oil prices. And increasingly, we've also seen PPP mechanism being drawn out or being used on newer segments of the water market, such as storage and transmission pipelines. And of course, another reason for investment, in particularly in desalination and water treatment projects, is the fact that the aquifers in the region are fast depleting, and there is a need to diversify the sources of fresh water, potable water, brackish water, away from these aquifers to seawater desalination facilities instead. Just a reminder that this presentation is being recorded, and you'll be able to watch it again in your own time on YouTube when we've uploaded it. And you'll also receive a copy of this presentation during the next hour if you have registered for this webinar. And then finally, at the end of this presentation, I'll be taking your questions. So if you do have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box on the Zoom menu bar, and I will do my best to answer them if I can at the end of this presentation. Now, naturally, again, looking at drivers or the reasons for accelerating water investment in the region, well, as we all know, in the GCC, for example, there are no permanent rivers, and therefore, of course, there is a big water stress, particularly in the GCC. But if you can see here, Iran, Jordan, Egypt, well, all the markets in the region have very significant water stress levels, and therefore there is a very high dependence on desalination as the source of water. Now, that's a capex that you might not normally see in other parts of the world where there are more permanent rivers and higher rainfall levels. And then in the bigger markets such as Libya, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, then there's also a large there's a need to invest large amounts in water conveyance and transmission systems from the seawater desalination plants to inland areas where cities like Riyadh lie. So there's long distance conveyance as well for them. So clearly a region where water is of paramount importance and where governments really cannot afford to let up on spending for water projects generally. So while we're looking at these facts and figures for the region, we can see here that the MENA region, generally speaking, particularly in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman, is the world's largest market for desalination, highly dependent on desalination. Without desalination technology, we just wouldn't be here today due to the lack of natural freshwater sources. And you can see that Saudi Arabia leads the way in terms of water desalination capacity, followed by the UAE and then Qatar. But even markets with larger freshwater sources, such as the Nile in Egypt, and also in the north of Algeria, there's still quite a large degree of desalination. Likewise, there has been a very significant investment in wastewater treatment capacity. Egypt leads the way there by a large margin. This ties into the fact that it's got a larger population, therefore needs larger wastewater treatment capacity. But you can see also that Saudi Arabia, UAE are fast catching up. This is a segment of the market which really 10, 20 years ago did not see a lot of investment, but policies introduced particularly for the water reuse and treated sewage effluent for use for beautification, for industrial purposes, agriculture. This has really come in as a central priority of governments in the region, and therefore we've also seen a very significant investment, not just in the wastewater treatment plants and sewage treatment plants themselves, but also in the collection distribution networks that they require too. In terms of the key stakeholders in the region, in terms of the key clients, well, we've seen that Saudi Arabia is the largest desalinator and one of the largest wastewater treatment markets too. And we can see in terms of the value of work under execution, Saudi Water Authority, which is essentially the new water agency for this kingdom, in which it bundles into it the SWCC, the Salam Water Conversion Corporation, as well as other entities such as the Saudi Water Partnership Company, the Saudi Irrigation Authority, and others, and the Water Transmission Company, WETCO. That leads the way. We also have NEOM with the Trojena Dam system, but also a large number of district cooling and desalination facilities of its own. The National Water Company of Saudi Arabia, the PIF subsidiary, which handles sewage treatment, wastewater treatment in the municipal areas of the kingdom, and then other key utility clients such as Ministry of Construction in Iraq, Ministry of Water and Irrigation in Jordan, and so on. Very much dominated by government entities and utilities, as you would expect. Very little privatization at the top end of the value chain for water infrastructure, whether that's in terms of desalination or treatment and distribution. Of course, we are seeing greater PPP investment, but all of these fall under the aegis of government entities. In terms of the main contractors, we have a good mix and diversified mix of both local, regional, and international contractors. For example, we have Mutlaq Damuk Al Ghurairi Contracting of Saudi Arabia, which is involved in a large number of water projects in the kingdom. We build out of Italy, which is building the Trojena Dams, Egypt's Petrojet, active across the region, Al Kharaif in Saudi Arabia, Power China, Arashi Training Contracting, and so on. So a very good diverse mix of both local and international contractors. So the market is open from the supply side to everyone. Now, I mentioned PPP, and the vast majority today of desalination and water treatment projects, an increasing number of transmission and storage projects are being carried out by the private sector through PPP mechanism. And there are two clear leaders in this regard. They are Aqua Power from Saudi Arabia, of course, and Engie out of France. And you'll see here that they are the big investors by a long way in IWPs. IWPPs in the region, 17 each. Other Aquapower has by far the larger net capacity. And then we've got a bit of a jump before we see the other players, Malakoff out of Malaysia, Marubeni, Sumitomo, Mitsui, for example, out and Mitsubishi out of Japan, and then a range of other companies. Now, one of the key observations, I think, of the water PPP market in the MENA region is a relative lack of international developers active in the region. So there's very few beyond this list active or with long-term concessions in the MENA region. And there is, I think, also as a result, a good opportunity for international developers who are not yet active in the market to come in and participate in this, what is quite low risk long-term PPP projects. Okay, now let's look at some of the contractual performance or projects performance of the market. So let's take a look at the recent history for project awards in the MENA projects market for water in the region. And first of all, you'll see that the 2023 and 2024 numbers saw a very rapid increase and acceleration in water project spending. As you can see here again, the majority of which has been in Saudi Arabia, easily the largest water market in the region and also one of the world's largest as well. You also see that UAE is probably the second largest market most years, but every market in the region has to a greater or lesser extent major investment each year in water projects across the board. You'll see that, as I mentioned, 2023, big jump, 24, big jump, record levels, and 2025 with about 4 months to go. We are maybe not going to hit last year's numbers, but we are going to be comfortably above the 10-year average investment levels for the year as a whole. Again, with Saudi Arabia leading, but also some major investments in Jordan and UAE too. And I think the performance or the increase in spending over the last 2 or 3 years is really underlines the priority nature of the water market for the MENA region. Most countries now have a very ambitious targets for water reuse, for ensuring greater levels of storage, for strategic storage reasons as well, but also for reducing unaccounted for water levels and ensuring that sewage provision collection is reaching the majority of the population. So I think we are entering a slightly new paradigm for water projects in the region. It's a very good time to be in the market, or if not so, to enter the market. Again, unlike, say, construction or transport infrastructure projects, and a bit like power sector, governments don't really have a choice but to invest in power and water, because if they don't, there's going to be water shortages. So power and water utilities in general always tend to be the key priority for governments and countries in the region. Now, again, just the same data, but just looking at it a different way, you can see $27 billion worth of water projects awarded in 2024. That's nearly double the 21 and 20 regions, and certainly much higher numbers, and certainly much higher than the 2016, 17, 18 numbers. So we are, as I said, we are entering a slightly new paradigm for increased project spending. Now, in terms of the distribution or breakup by sub-segment or sector of that spending, you can see that individually, the water desalination market tends to be the largest single sub-segment, followed by water treatment plants. But overall, storage facilities, dams, reservoirs, storage tanks, as well as distribution collection networks and stormwater drainage systems, and conveyance, long distance conveyance and transmission systems, actually, when aggregated, tend to comprise the largest single segment of spending when put all together. Here from MEED projects, this is just some selected top water projects under execution, under construction in the region. Many of you will know about the huge dam project underway in Neom at Trojena, which will host the 2029 Asian Winter Games. It's also going to be a tourist resort. That's a huge project, one being undertaken by WeBuild. We also have the desalination plant being carried out in Iraq, which urgently needs desalination capacity. We also got awarded earlier this year the Aqaba Amman Water Desalination Conveyance Project, which is the most critical project of all probably in the region. Without it, the future of Jordan looks quite bleak as it fast runs out of water resources. And you can see we've got a variety of different water projects, transmission pipelines, treatment plants, desalination facilities, and so on. Okay, now let's look at the future projects market. But before we do, I've got a poll question for you. Which MENA country do you believe offers the best water projects opportunity going forward? Is it Oman, Qatar, Egypt, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, or another country? Let's get your views. So 552 attendees live right now, and we've got already about 330 responses, so nice representative sample. And there's a clear winner here. I think that reflects the data we've seen, and that is Saudi Arabia. 75% of you say that it is the largest future projects market opportunity. I think I would have to agree with that. I don't think many people could disagree with that. But we also have Egypt, 7%, UAE, 9%, Iraq, 5%, Qatar, 2%, Oman, 3%, and we have other with a grand total of 0. Okay, very interesting. So most of us are in agreement that it's all about Saudi Arabia right now. And that tends to be reflected or underlined also by the value of the known, planned and unawarded projects market in the region. I was doing some calculations about $140 billion worth of water, known, planned, unawarded water projects in the region. That's those which we know about today. Of course, there are going to be many more over the years to come. And Saudi Arabia leads that way with just under $50 billion of known water projects in the pipeline, followed by the UAE at $40 billion. And I know Saudi Arabia gets all the attention, but I think it's important to note that UAE is also a very significant future market, and we'll discuss that in due course. But Morocco as well, particularly in dams, but also for the first time really investing large amounts in desalination projects as well. Then Egypt, of course, mainly in the wastewater treatment market. And then Qatar, Kuwait, much smaller countries, much smaller populations, but still significant markets. And then Iraq, Oman, Algeria, and then others. Now, of that same data, future pipeline, you can see here that the largest chunk of that future spend is in the FEED stage, design stage, $51 billion, followed by study stage. So about $80 billion are in the longer term. We then, in the shorter term, in terms of those projects out for qualification or bidding, we have approximately 50, 67, 70, let's say $70 billion worth of projects in the short term currently out to bid, short-term opportunities, shall we say. And then in terms of that same numbers broken down, we can see that the largest future chunk of spending is in transmission, conveyance, storage, and urban distribution and sewage treatment networks, $94 billion. We have desalination at 19%, $28 billion, and then water treatment at $26 billion, 18%. Now, curious again to get your opinion. In which water projects market segment do you see the most opportunity and fastest growth? Is it desalination, wastewater treatment, storage, long distance transmission, urban distribution collection networks, or other? Again, let's see. I suspect this one will be a little bit more evenly spread. It's always good to get your views because it allows us to, and you, to see what others in the market are seeing and thinking. All right, so it's pretty close, this one. We have 37% of you saying that desalination segment is going to be the biggest opportunity and fastest growth, followed at 33% by wastewater sewage treatment, 19% of you at long distance transmission conveyance systems, and 6% of you at the sort of urban distribution collection networks, and then 3% of you at storage, dams, storage tanks, reservoirs, and 1% of you saying other. Okay, great. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Just a reminder, please, if you do have any questions, I will be doing a Q&A at the end of this presentation. I'll try to answer any questions you have. If you do have any, please stick them into the chat, the Q&A box. If you click on your Zoom menu bar, more, and then you have a field saying Q&A, and then submit your questions there, and I'll try to answer them if I can. Also, this is being recorded, will be uploaded to YouTube in due course, and if you registered for this webinar, you will also receive a copy of this presentation over the next hour or so. Right, in terms of top future clients. Now, you may have heard me just say Dubai is a very, or the UAE is an active market, and one of those reasons is, as you can see here, the largest single future client at the moment is Dubai Municipality at $31 billion of future plan projects. Now, in Dubai, you have DEWA, which is responsible for desalination and distribution of those desalination networks to the end user. But then you have Dubai Municipality, which takes over on the sewage treatment and also on the drainage and stormwater networks. And it has two big projects coming up, which I'll talk about in a sec. We then have ONEE, l'Office National d'Électricité de l'Eau Potable in Morocco, which handles all water projects in the kingdom there in terms of desalination, distribution and treatment. We have WETCO in Saudi Arabia, which is the developer arm of the Saudi Water Authority, SWA, and it is primarily focused on long-distance transmission surveillance and conveyance systems, both on a PPP and on EPC basis. We then have Saudi Water Partnership Company, which is delivering PPP projects, both at desalination, storage, and treatment level. Then National Water Company of Saudi Arabia, which I mentioned, is the urban sewage treatment distribution collection agency. So in Saudi Arabia, the water projects the clients tend to be spread over a number of different entities. And then you've also got the irrigation authority, which handles irrigation pipeline projects, as well as some dam projects. And likewise, you also have the Ministry of Electricity and Water, and Agriculture, which also handles some water projects too. NEOM, as we know, it's got its own water distributions and desalination systems, as well as the Trojana dams. And then we've got various other agencies around the region. Some key projects in the short-term and longer-term stages. We got, well, I'll talk about that in more detail. The strategic sewerage tunnel projects in Dubai, but you can see here we've got, in terms of top projects, we've got various different water injection schemes on the oil and gas side. We've got transmission systems. We've got desalination facilities and so on. And then longer term, again, similar. We've got strategic storage reservoirs. We've got sewage collection systems. And the vast majority of these projects, as I've mentioned before, are going to be done on a PPP basis, with the private sector coming in to finance, build, develop, operate, and then ultimately transfer the project at the end of the concession period. Okay, third poll question today. What do you see as the biggest challenge currently facing water projects in the region? Again, very interesting question. 1, financing and PPP structures. 2, technology and innovation adoption. 3, regulatory and policy frameworks. 4, environmental and sustainability pressures. 5, supply chain and cost inflation, and 6, other. Let's get your opinion here. Okay, interesting results coming in here. All right, now we have half of you, 50% exactly, saying that financing and PPP structures is the biggest challenge facing water projects. In second place, we have supply chain and cost inflation, 20%. Then environmental and sustainability pressures, next at 13%. Technology and innovation adoption, 9%. Regulatory and policy frameworks, 7%, and other, 1%. So other is not doing so well today. So yeah, again, there seems to be a broad mix of challenges that you perceive, but the biggest one in terms of the majority of you thinking or seeing is financing and PPP structures, which of course is important given that today most current and future water projects at the desalination and the larger levels of transmission, storage, and treatment is being done by PPP. And so bankability of projects, obtaining project finance, putting together developer consortiums, as I mentioned earlier, maybe not enough developers active in the market, and reaching financial close for these projects is, according to half of you, the biggest challenge right now. Quick plug for our WhatsApp channel before I look at individual projects. MEED Global Data currently has a channel where you can be updated with the latest news and analysis on all sectors of the regional projects market. If you're interested in joining that channel, it's very unobtrusive. You get maybe 1 or 2 updates a day, and you can scan the QR code there, and you will join that channel, and you will get very useful, interesting updates on the latest projects in the region, not just in water side, but in all elements of the projects market. So well worth joining. Okay, now I'm going to go run through 5 or 6 of the top projects in the region, just to give you an idea of what's happening. I mentioned this project earlier. This is the Dubai Strategic Sewerage Tunnels, better known as DSST. And this is really about transforming sewage collection in Dubai. It's split into 2 main geographical elements. The Dubai side, which you can see on the left-hand side, is collecting sewage, and then with a deep sewer gravity tunnel, transporting sewage, collected sewage all the way to the Jebel Ali treatment plant. And then on the other side of the creek, we have the Wasan Deira element of the project, which will transport or convey and collect sewage, again, through a deep sewage gravity tunnel all the way to the Alawir water treatment plant. And both Alawir and Jebel Ali will be, the sewage treatment plants will be expanded as well as a result of this project. You can see that's broken down into multiple packages. The intention by the client Dubai municipality is to have this done on a PPP basis for the most part, and has already conducted 2 pre-qualification exercises of developer groups and EPC contractors in advance of the main RFPs for the projects, and actually just last week reissued and reopened the pre-qualification process for both. So if you didn't or weren't able to participate the first time round, now it is now reopened for pre-qualification. But this is, according to the government, a $20 billion or so project, so absolutely enormous, and will transform sewage collection and treatment in the Emirate. But that's not all. Dubai municipality is also engaging in a very large $8 billion plus project called Tasrif, which means drainage in Arabic. This is all by Dubai municipality, and this really follows the major floods that I'm sure we all remember and saw last year. And the aim here is to build a very robust stormwater drainage network, which can then be treated or drained, reused. And this is already being rolled out. And you can see under on the bottom left here some of the major contracts already awarded and or in bidding. So again, a very significant project, split into maybe smaller contracts other than compared with the DSST, and there's no indication that this is going to be done on a PPP basis, but nonetheless it is going to be, again, transform the infrastructure in Dubai. Now, moving on to Saudi Arabia, we have the Water Transmission Technologies Company, WETCO, which is a part of the Saudi Water Authority. And this entity is responsible for long-distance transmission programs. That's primarily conveying desalinated potable water from the coast to inland areas, huge wide-diameter pipelines. And it is planning about 396 individual projects to 2030, worth about 61.6 billion riyals of capex, which it has said it is planning. Of that number, 49.2 billion is in water transmission pipelines, 12 huge individual projects covering more than 5,000 kilometers and a total capacity of 3.46 million cubic meters a day. Some of those it will be tender as on an EPC basis. On others, it will be the developer itself. I'll give you some examples of these projects. Of course, it's not just the pipelines themselves, but the massive pumping stations that are required, as well as some storage facilities as well. And then alongside that, at the end of these pipelines, or at the beginning, it also is building 46 strategic water storage projects across 11 regions with total capacity of 22.5 million cubic meters, an investment of 12.5 billion riyals. Now, it's important to note that Saudi Arabia has a plan to increase its strategic water storage capacity to about 7 days of demand, and up from about 2 today. So that's clearly going to require big investment in dams and storage capacity, reservoirs and storage tanks in order to achieve that. Now, another entity, big entity with even greater plans for capex investment in the kingdom is National Water Company, which is responsible for sewage treatment, water treatment within the cities, as well as distribution and collection of wastewater and sewage, and then the distribution of treated sewage effluent to end users, whether that's private sector industry, public entities, or for agriculture and irrigation purposes, as well as beautification needs. Now, it's got a massive program, about $122 billion worth of projects up to 2030, comprising 4,700 plus individual projects, of which 641 already under construction, about 52.8 billion riyals. It's got 407 projects worth more than $10 billion under tender, and but the vast majority of the planned capex is future projects. Here we've got the breakdown. I won't read through them all. You can see for yourself, but the largest single segment is in water networks and distribution pipelines, and in wastewater and sewage pipelines as well. So a very active client. Whether it reaches that $122 billion goal remains to be seen. I suspect that that number won't be hit, but even if it's only a quarter of that figure, that's still a very, very significant investment. Now, moving outside the GCC, absolutely critical project for the future of a country is the Aqaba Amman Water Desalination and Conveyance Project, otherwise known as the AAWDCP. As you'll see on the map here, this is essentially the construction of a very large desalination plant on the coast in Aqaba, and then the transmission of water produced from that all the way up to Amman. This is an enormous project, $3.5 billion, vital for the future and security of the kingdom. We're looking at something like 300 million cubic meters a day of desalination capacity to be constructed, a 445 kilometer long transmission pipeline, 6 pumping stations, as well as various other storage facilities, 430 megawatt power plant, I believe, intake systems, brine outfalls, and so on. Now, earlier, this is being done on a PPP basis with a lot of development bank support as well. And earlier this year, a group of Meridian and Suez were selected as the successful developers to build, finance, operate the project, and with Orascom out of Egypt and Vinci from France building it. 30-year concession, and we're hoping that financial close will be reached soon, and then the project can begin construction. And finally, another example of a significant project outside the GCC, this time for oil and gas purposes. This is the Iraq Common Seawater Supply Project, CSSP, and this is to serve oil fields and gas fields in the south, where the water will be used for water injection purposes into the oil reservoirs. It involves a very large 1.19 million cubic meter a day seawater treatment plant, and then construction of pipelines. And as you can see, the breakdown of the different elements of the project on the left-hand side, where it will then be used and distributed towards the various different wellheads and reservoirs for injection. So a very critical project. Hyundai was awarded the project earlier this year. So that's it in terms of the presentation itself. I will now answer some questions from you. But before I do, last quick poll question. As ever, we'd like to know how MEED can support your business. So quick question here. If you want to know more or would like us to get in touch with you about some of the services and solutions MEED can offer you, please feel free to answer. So you have a choice of the MEED.com News Features Analysis Service, the MEED Projects Project Tracking Service, our Premium Intelligence Reports, particularly the water one, the Events, Business and Marketing Solutions. Great. Well, thank you very much for that. And I just wish also, since you're all on here, and particularly because most water projects going forward are going to be PPP projects, I want to highlight to you that on Monday, next Monday, we have a very interesting webinar with the National Center for Privatization, PPP, the NCP in Saudi Arabia, which alongside the water project clients is responsible for PPP tendering and delivery in the kingdom. It has more than 50 major PPP projects in the pipeline, and I'm sure in the longer term that number will increase to more than 200. Of course, under its aegis are several dozen water projects. It's already delivered alongside the SWPC, WETCO, and other water clients a large number of PPP water projects. So if you want to hear more about NCP's plans and how you can participate in the PPP program in Saudi Arabia, not just in the water projects market, but also across different segments such as the stadiums program, schools, healthcare, the airports program, then really should join this webinar, where you also have the opportunity not just to hear from NCP engineer Salman Badr, who's the EVP for Infrastructure Advisory, but also to ask him questions. So if you want to register for that, it's free. It's next Monday at 1 o'clock UAE time, 12 p.m. midday in Saudi Arabia and the other GCC markets. You can take a photo or scan the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner and register for that. It'll be a stimulating, very interesting discussion, and you'll also have the opportunity, as I said, to answer questions to the NCP directly, but also learn much more about its PPP plans, including specifically its water PPP plans. And again, just a quick mention of our wastewater projects market report. Everything you've seen in the webinar today, plus a lot more. It's more than 600 pages long. All the data you can possibly think of about the water projects market, the structures, the plans, the policies and regulations, the individual projects themselves. If you're interested at all in the water projects market in the region, then this is definitely worth buying. As I said before, you get a discount code using the code webinar 600. You get a nice discount if you use that before 8th of October. And again, if you want to know more about the report, the table of contents, the sample pages and so on, then please scan the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay, right. presentation over. Now, let's take your questions. Now, let me see. Right, I've got 17 questions already. If you do have any questions, please put it into the Q&A box and I will do my best to answer them. Right, first question. How does the water sector view the balance between domestic municipal needs and new large industrial users such as data centers? So that's a very good question, because data centers not only are fast emerging water users, but also very fast emerging power sector users. And as it stands, there's still some way to go, I think, for the regulators to fully take into account the additional demand requirements from these data centers, as well as industrial users. So I think it remains to be seen. There's certainly the desire is to have full treated sewage effluent and water reuse in most of the countries in the region. And of course, a lot of that will be directed towards industrial users, including data centers, at different prices. And therefore, the government can recoup some of its investment in water generation and treatment by selling the reused water on. Of course, the challenge is you still need to build the infrastructure to transport that treated water to the end user. And in many cases, of course, that's difficult to do without knowing where or what the demand base will be. So it's a good question. I suspect that a lot of these big data centers and industrial users will build their own captive water and power plants to help with that particular issue. Is there any potential for water well drilling activities? Well, there is a bit, although there has been a policy to move away from water aquifer extraction, mainly because these water aquifers are being depleted. There are still various freshwater resources, and in Saudi Arabia, for example, there are still 3 regions where it is envisaged that freshwater resources will continue to be used. In the other regions, however, there is a policy of phasing out freshwater usage completely. But yes, in some markets, depending on the different countries, there can be continued need for freshwater drilling, and also, of course, then treatment and transmission distribution as well. So countries with slightly larger water sources, such as freshwater sources such as Algeria, Morocco, perhaps Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and so on, there will be also remains that focus there as well. Could you show the forecasted water projects in Saudi Arabia over the next 3 years? Well, I think we saw earlier that Saudi Arabia has about $30 billion of known, planned, and unawarded water projects. I would say 3/5 of that or so, or that 30 billion or so, should be awarded over the next 3 years. And of course, that's only the projects that we know about today. But the beauty about water investment, particularly desalination, transmission, and storage, is the fact that it's being done by the PPP on a PPP basis, getting the private sector to finance the projects, which means that it's done off balance sheet without the government having to extend this capex in the short term, which does allow these projects to go ahead without having to depend on the vagaries of government budgets. So we can be quite optimistic, of course, that most water projects will go ahead. How active is the bank financing for the water sector in the GCC? Well, there is a significant demand for water projects financing. There is a long track record, 2-decade track record of water PPPs in the region, and it is a fairly low risk segment of the PPP market. And that's because the government generally commits to take or pay offtake. So regardless of the demand or production, the government will guarantee the offtake as long as the supplier, the developers or the owners of the plants are producing at the required amounts. So that makes it fairly low risk. And there's also, of course, a fairly lower construction operational risk with such long references and experiences of building desalination projects. It's an established technology. The banks tend to view the market quite favorably. However, with so many water projects, there must be question marks about the limitations of the banking sector exposure and how much they want to be exposed to one particular industry. So it is important that the sources of financing are extended more globally. And again, one of the reasons why there is an interest among most PPP clients in the region to extend the developer list for equity investors more globally and diversify among the few players active in the region. As we saw earlier, Engie and Aquapower are the biggest players by far, and they're just when there's a big gap, and there just aren't enough developers, full stop, active in the power or water PPP market in the region, and that needs to increase. Which countries across the globe are providing the highest services to support desalination and wastewater challenges in the Middle East in terms of consulting and engineering? Well, there are a lot of capable regional consultants, engineering firms capable of designing or engineering some of the larger projects. When it comes to the very big projects, then there is still engagement from some of the larger engineering firms globally, mainly from Europe, companies like ILF out of Austria and Germany, for example. And but there is an increasing amount of input from local engineering or regional engineering firms. In terms of developers as well, of course, Aquapower is a major, probably major client that's out of Saudi Arabia. And in terms of contracting, you can see it's a very diversified list, both regional, local and international contractors. So the market is open to everyone. Got a question here about the market being very much national. Do you foresee a change to rationalize water sourcing through transnational programs? So that's basically interconnection of water transmission systems between countries. Now, this is a very interesting geopolitical topic. About 15 years ago, there were attempts to build a GCC water grid or network similar to the GCC power grid. That never really took off, and as far as I am aware, there are no or very, very few cross-border water transmission systems, unlike in power. And a lot of that is geography. A lot of that also is geopolitics. A lot of it is mechanisms for payments, but also I don't believe at this moment in time there is necessarily the political will. That might change, but necessarily the political will for a region-wide water network currently. Question here about localization. Yes, clearly, water sector, like all other project markets sectors in the region, there is an increasing emphasis on localization of both talent, human capital, knowledge transfer, and equipment and technology. So just as we're seeing in the oil and gas sector, just as we're seeing in construction, EPC contractors and developers have to focus on using local content. The required percentages are increasing year by year, both for local content and materials and equipment, but also for personnel. And that the water sector is no exception. So yes, there are in-country value programs and localization programs that companies do have to be aware of and which must follow. How many years are considered for the future projects planned shown in the PowerPoint? So essentially the future value of planned known and unawarded projects is all of those known projects. A lot of them, $70 billion or so in the tender stage, which indicates they are short-term projects which should be awarded over the next 6 months to a year. And then the longer term ones could be anything from 1 year to 5 years or even longer. Of course, this number always fluctuates because projects are announced or become known every week, and so that number will grow over time. But essentially, you're looking at 1 to 5 years in the most cases. So the PPP projects market is dominated by a few players, as we saw earlier. What are the key challenges which block out other players for coming on board? Well, I speak a lot with PPP clients in the GCC in particular. And the one challenge that they all have, regardless of the sector, is not enough PPP developers coming into the region and bidding on projects. And whether that's power, whether it's water, whether it's transport, airports, roads, you name it. The big issue is a lack of PPP players and developers. We can see that it's dominated by a handful of companies, some from Japan, the Mitsubishis, Marubeni, Sumitomo's, of course, out of France, the Suez, the NGs, and of course, we mustn't forget in Saudi Arabia, Aquapower, Al Jihaz Holding, and others. But if you go further afield around the world, a lot of PPP developers are not active in the region. Why that is exactly, it's not particularly clear. Is it regulatory? Is it financial? Is it awareness? But the market is open, and there are major efforts by the PPP clients, companies like SWPC, like NCP, like the developers out of the UAE, to attract more developers to come into the region. And they will actively help developers to come in and to bid for their projects. They're eager to get the feedback and understand how they can make it easier for developers to come in. And it's also surprising to me that there aren't, because again, we're talking about fairly low risk, fairly established mechanisms, and very bankable projects. So it would seem to me that international developers are missing out. Of course, you have some very entrenched competition, particularly Aquapower, but the government really wants to diversify that. So whether it's teaming up with Aquapower or whether it's competing against them, they would like more competition. And they don't, of course, no one really wants so much capacity in the hands of just a few players. So it's also important for strategic reasons for more developers to come in. Okay, a very helpful remark here. Someone's saying package J2 of the DSST is now part of package J1, and together they're known as package J. So thank you very much for that. We'll look into that and rectify if possible. Through which platform are PPP projects in the UAE and the region tendered? Well, depends on the client, but they tend to be all tendered independently by that client. So Dubai Municipality tenders its projects separately, either through the Dubai e-supply website and platform. DEWA will tender its own projects through its own platform. And then again, same in places like Saudi Arabia, WETCO, NWC, and SWPC have their own procurement processes. So you generally have to register individually with each of these entities, as well as the Etimad platform in order to register. On the other hand, in places like Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman, there's one central procurement, the tenders committee, which allows you to pre-qualify under classifications rather than individually, and then bid through the tender board. So it really depends on the market, but generally you need to pre-qualify and register whether you're an EPC contractor, supplier, or developer individually of each of the key clients. When will the Jebel Ali independent sewage treatment plant be launched, and when will it be a PPP? There's a slightly different mechanism for the Wasan and Jebel Ali expansions as part of the DSST, but there will be quasi-PPP framework, and that is being launched alongside the other major packages. So again, there are some reissuing of the pre-qualification process for that. So if you haven't already participated in the initial pre-qualification, please go to Dubai Municipality or the e-supply portal, register, and obtain the documents and qualify. What do we mean by other water sector? Other water sector, we mean transmission pipelines, storage facilities, distribution and collection networks, and doesn't exclude treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, and desalination facilities. Do you have any news on the Jebel 4 and 6 seawater reverse osmosis plant status? Those projects, I believe, are under the SWPC. I don't have information on the top of my head, but one, I think, good thing about the water projects market in the region is that it is much more transparent in terms of future visibility of projects than other markets. And that's because the planning for these projects is done a long time in advance. So, for example, if you look at Saudi Arabia, or you look at Oman, or you look at Abu Dhabi, they all issue 7-year statements which outline future demand growth and the amount of capacity that they require to have in place over the next 7 years. And therefore, they outline the projects, the locations, the capacities of these facilities that are required in order to meet those demand trends. So there is a lot of visibility that makes it a lot easier for companies, contractors and developers and suppliers to plan ahead for the spending. Lots of questions here. I'm just trying to find ones that I can answer. Another question here about registration. In Saudi Arabia in particular, you need, depending on the client, you will need to pre-qualify and register with different entities, with the SWPC, for example, with WETCO, with the SWA, and with NWC, which all have separate procurement mechanisms. Some of them, like the Irrigation Authority and MEWA projects, and some SWA projects, you actually have a centralized procurement system using government procurement law, which is the Etimad website. So you will also need to register with that. So it depends on the market and it depends on the client. You highlighted 6 projects, DSST, etc. Where would most of the water pipes be fabricated? Well, as I mentioned, there is a big push for localization, and the region has a good capability of manufacturing both small diameter and wide diameter transmission pipelines. And I would expect most of the pipelines to be manufactured in region, perhaps with some exceptions. How is the O&M market going on in Saudi Arabia and perhaps other GCC countries? Well, we've been talking here about CapEx, but O&M, of course, is even larger segment of the market over time, and is a very active market. On the PPP side, obviously, you have the developers using an operator will operate the plants over 20, 30-year concession. And then within the sort of more municipal segment, the sort of smaller sewage treatment plants and the networks, then these tend to be awarded on a smaller EPC basis. So you have contractors or operators operating them over a 5-year period, for example. But a very lucrative and very large market, and very significant in its own right. Okay, we're slightly overrunning of time now. So the Dubai market, $31 billion of known plan unawarded projects. What is the time frame? Well, it's very short term. Their Tasreef project is already underway, multiple tenders being issued every week by Dubai municipality for that, as well as other pipeline projects, sewage projects, and drainage projects not under the Tasreef program. So that is also happening right now. And the DSST is also coming up very shortly. And I would expect to see major developments on that over the next 6 months to 1 year. So it's happening now. So you have to, if you want to participate, you need to be registering and participating right now. I have heard that the hardness of the desalinated water in Saudi Arabia could pose a risk to the viability of using desalinated water for data centers due to sediment in the water. Have you heard about this risk? No, I haven't. It's an interesting point that you've raised and something that we need to look into. I would suspect that there would need to be an additional treatment process to remove some of that sediment before they can be used for cooling purposes in these data centers. What is the average price to treat water desalination? That's an excellent point you've just raised, and something I haven't touched on is the pricing or levelized cost of water desalination, which has come down a lot in recent years. The advent of RO has meant much lower energy requirements, which meant a lot less capex required in power capacity and therefore power capex projects. And that's helped reduce them a lot as well. I don't see many projects in Abu Dhabi lately. There were always desalination plants on the go, expansions of existing facilities and under the existing developers in Abu Dhabi. But Abu Dhabi has been a bit ahead of the curve. The STEP project 10 years ago saw Abu Dhabi invest in this deep gravity sewage tunnels. So it's a bit ahead of that game, and has a slightly more advanced, it has already a very robust drainage and stormwater drainage system as well. So, but there are always investments by Transco and the various subsidiary companies responsible for distribution of water in Abu Dhabi, but not at the same scale maybe as we're seeing in Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Dubai right now. Okay, I'll take one more question because we're running out of time. Do you believe the era of big wastewater treatment plant projects has passed us, and we are now looking at smaller decentralized plants more likely to prevail in the future? Well, if we look at the projects currently underway on plan, most of them are still world scale, utility scale water treatment plants. But as the urban networks get more established, then I believe that we will see a greater emphasis on smaller decentralized facilities across, especially the larger geographical countries. So if you look at, say, Egypt, it's got 47 smaller facilities planned decentralized. NWC as well as in Saudi Arabia has also dozens and dozens of smaller treatment plants, 1,000 cubic meters a day, 5,000 cubic meters a day planned in various more remote residential communities across the kingdom. And also, if you look at SWPC, it's planning on a PPP basis several clusters of smaller treatment plants across the kingdom on a PPP basis. So multiple regional clusters of plants again, and that smaller scale. So there is a drive to build these smaller decentralized plants, but we also haven't. I don't believe we've seen the end of the larger wastewater treatment plant market either. And yes, in terms of another question, the larger facilities tend to be developed on a PPP basis. When bundled together in clusters, like those planned by SWPC, they will also be done on a PPP basis. But those which are standalone smaller packages under, for example, the NWC will tend to be EPC plus O&M. Again, thank you for some clarifications on the DSST projects. It seems there have been some changes in the packages and scope. We'll update accordingly. And I believe we've reached the end of your questions and the webinar as a whole. Sorry if I didn't get to answer all of them. Some of them I'm not able to answer. Some of them I don't have time, but we've got a record of all your questions, so we will make sure to try and answer them offline after this. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you very much for your attention, for staying till the end. I hope you found that insightful and valuable. Don't forget, on Monday we've got a webinar with the NCP, which is well worth looking at because we'll be touching on the water PPP market in Saudi Arabia. And then next month, we'll be looking at a very different market, which is the transport, roads, rail, airports, ports market in the region. So thank you very much, and hope to speak and see you all again very soon. Thank you.